Thanks, honey. I said it the way a 1950s sitcom husband would say it. One eyebrow up, voice pitched a shade too deep. The teacup lifted like a prop. It was supposed to make her laugh. She didn't laugh. She just stood there, one hand still curled around her own cup, and looked at me. Really looked. And then, quiet enough that I almost missed it, she said, "Say it again." The smile went out of my face. I looked at her, really looked back, and I knew she wasn't joking, and neither was I. My name is Isaiah Monroe. I am 34 years old, and I live alone in a small craftsman bungalow on Rutledge Avenue in Charleston, South Carolina. 6 in the morning is black coffee at my kitchen counter, standing up, watching the light come in over the neighbor's magnolia. 7 is my truck idling in front of a house that was already old when my great-grandfather was a boy. That is my job. I am a structural engineer. I walk into those houses down in south of Broad, and gently, patiently, I tell them how much longer they can keep standing. My company is called Monroe Structural. It is just me, one assistant named Marcus, and a draftswoman named Riva. We do not build high-rises. We do not touch new condos. We work on the historic ones, the brick foundations laid before the Civil War, the cypress beams gone dark with 150 summers of Charleston damp, the lime mortar walls cracking because they have breathed too much sea air for too many decades. It is slow work. A single survey can take me 3 weeks. I like it that way. I used to work at my father's firm, Monroe and Associates. Hotels, condos, convention centers, big drawings, big signatures, big checks. I was good at it. 3 years ago, I walked away. Not because of my father, not because of the work, because after I signed the divorce papers with Sabrina, I sat down in front of a rendering of a 12-story building and could not find a single line in it that meant anything to me anymore. I needed to work on a kind of structure I could put my hand on, wood, brick, something that had been standing for 100 years and was still standing. There were 3 of us, once: Isaiah, Sabrina, Delaney. We met freshman year at the College of Charleston, 15 years ago now. 3 years in, I married Sabrina. Delaney flew to Edinburgh the week after the wedding, and she stayed for 12 years. Her mother passed away last year. 3 months ago, she came home for good. Then, 6 weeks ago, an email came into the Monroe Structural inbox. Subject line: Structural Survey Request, Charleston, Single House, Legare Street, built 1912. Client: Delaney Rowe. Riva forwarded it to me without a word, only a small raised eyebrow across the office. I read the client name 3 times before I opened the attachment. I took the job. I drove out to the house she grew up in. Same wooden porch I had fallen asleep on one summer afternoon in the year 2011. She opened the door. Isaiah, Delaney. We did not hug. I went inside with my clipboard, my measuring wheel, my camera. The rear foundation had settled about 3 centimeters. The house needed shoring at least 4 weeks of work. I wrote the report at my kitchen table that night, and I sent it to her in the morning. A week later, she called. Not about the foundation, about the desk. Her mother's walnut writing desk, made in 1912, the same year as the house sitting up in the master bedroom, directly above the section of foundation we were about to lift. The vibration from the shoring rig could crack the top. She wanted to know if I could hold on to it while the crew worked. Her rental was small. She had nowhere to put it. My dining room was empty. I said, yes. The desk has been in my dining room ever since. 3 weeks after it arrived, she started dropping by. Just to check on it, she said. The first time she brought 1 takeout box. The next time she brought 2. By the 4th week, Tuesday nights, Thursday nights, and Sunday nights were hers in my kitchen, without either of us ever putting it into words. We never talk about Sabrina. We do not ask each other why. She sits at the counter beside her mother's desk. I pour the wine. We eat. I do not believe in fate. I believe in people who know exactly whose door they are opening, and how slowly, and why. She said she came to check on the desk. I let her say that for 4 weeks. The best structures are the ones that do not need to explain why they are standing. She would come at 7 o'clock in the evening with a brown paper bag from Bertha's or Callie's a shrimp po' boy, a bowl of she crab soup, sometimes just cornbread reheated in tinfoil that she had wrapped that morning. I would open the door, and she would walk straight past me into the kitchen, the way she used to walk into her mother's kitchen when we were 19. She would set the bag down on the counter without looking at me, take 2 plates out of my cupboard, as if she had always kept them there, and pour us both a glass of water from the pitcher I kept in the fridge. We ate at the counter, not at the table, because the table was not a table anymore. The table was where the desk lived, standing quietly under a clean white sheet. Our conversations moved sideways. She told me about Edinburgh, rain all winter, a little coffee shop in Stockbridge where she read manuscripts on cold mornings, hands wrapped around a heavy white mug, a flat above a bakery that always smelled like burnt sugar. 12 years of small breakfasts, small friends, small evenings at pubs where nobody knew her by any older name. I told her small pieces of the job, a federal-style house on Meeting Street where the main girder had gone soft with termites, a widow in Ansonborough whose piazza roof was 3 degrees off level and did not know it. We avoided the house on Ligari Street after sundown. That was daylight territory. What happened in my kitchen was something else. One night, she pulled the white sheet off the desk and ran her hand across the walnut top, the way you would run your hand across the shoulder of a horse you had not seen in a long time. Her pinky caught a splinter. The edge of the top had warped a hair in the humidity. She hissed once. I came over. I took her hand in mine, and I pulled the splinter out with the tweezers from my keyring, and I held on to her hand for 1 second longer than the splinter took, then 2 seconds longer. She was the one who let go first, but her eyes did not. Not for a long moment. There was a small red bead of blood on her pinky. She wiped it on the tail of my shirt without asking, and neither of us said anything about that either. Another night, I opened the shallow drawer of the desk, looking for a scrap of felt to put under a corner, and something small fell out onto the floor. A bookmark, hand-stitched, cream linen, my initials on one side and hers on the other, D.R., in blue thread. She had made it in the 8th grade and given it to me when she lent me her copy of East of Eden. I gave the book back. I never gave the bookmark back. It had traveled with me through 2 moves, through my drawer at the old house with Sabrina, and somehow I still do not know how it had ended up in the drawer of her mother's writing desk. I slipped it into a different drawer without saying anything. She saw me do it. She did not ask. But when I looked up, she was smiling, the smallest smile I had seen on her since she came home. There was a Thursday when it rained hard. She came in half an hour late with her hair wet and her jacket soaked through. I gave her a towel. She sat on the armchair with her knees pulled up and stared at the lamp on the side table for a long time. Then she said, "You never asked why I left." I said, "You never told me why you stayed away." The silence that came after that was the length of 1 full song on the jazz station in the kitchen. I know because the radio was on. It was a Bill Evans track, one of the slow ones, and it lasted almost 7 minutes, and neither of us moved during any of it. My father dropped by on a Saturday morning to have me look at a hairline crack in the plaster of his hallway. He saw her shoes by the door worn Oxfords, the kind she used to wear in college. He did not say anything. That night, he called me. "Do you remember her from back then, son?" I said, "Dad, I remember her better than I thought I did." He was quiet on the line for a long moment. Then he said, "That's usually how it works, Isaiah. The ones you kept in the back drawer." She told me one night that her mother, at the very end, had started calling everyone by the wrong name. Once she had called Delaney by my name instead of her father's. Delaney laughed when she said it, but she leaned back out of the lamplight when she said it too, and I noticed. I did not tell her I had noticed. I just poured her a second cup of tea. One afternoon, I drove out to the Laguerre Street site to inspect the shoring. She was standing on the back porch of her mother's house, holding a paper cup of coffee. Marcus, who had been working on the rear pier all morning, asked her a couple of questions about where she had first noticed the settling, the timing, the season, whether the doors upstairs had started sticking. She answered him without hesitating. Season, direction, floor, everything, down to the width of the hairline in the parlor ceiling. Marcus glanced over at me and mouthed, "She reads the survey reports." All of them. I already knew. She had corrected a section number in one of them the week before. Marcus finished his coffee in one long swallow and said, quietly enough that only I could hear him, "That one is not just a client, boss." I started leaving the screen door on the latch instead of locked. I started listening for the sound of her key in the gate. I bought the tea she liked at the Piggly Wiggly on the way home. Earl Grey, almond milk, 2 sugars, and I stocked it in the cupboard the way another man might stock flowers by the door. I never mentioned it. She noticed the third week. She did not mention it either. The night before the honey slipped out of my mouth, I almost told her something. She was sitting on the couch, and I was pouring her a second cup of tea, and I heard myself start to say it. Delaney. At the wedding, She stood up before I finished the sentence and put her hand out toward me, palm open, not to push me away, just to stop the sentence from finishing itself. Don't. Not tonight. She left 10 minutes later. I sat down at the kitchen counter, and I stared at the white sheet on the desk until the lamp bulb clicked off on its own timer. That was the night before. You still take your coffee too hot, she said one night when I poured mine a third time. Some habits are the only thing that survived that year, I said. Your foundation report was clearer than anything I read in 12 years in Edinburgh, she said another night, standing at my sink with her back to me. You have been reading structural reports for fun? I asked. Only yours, she said, and did not turn around. There was a smell in the house those weeks that I still catch sometimes, when I open the front door on a warm day, rain coming in through the screen. Cedar shavings from the closet, where I keep the toolbox my father gave me for my 21st birthday. Beeswax, the kind she used on the desk in wide, slow circles the way her mother used to do it. Her mother's ghost lived in my dining room for 6 weeks. Neither of us complained. There was a boulder between us in every one of those rooms. Its name was Sabrina. Neither of us had the strength yet to pick it up and carry it out the door. But we had started, without saying so, to build a room around it. That is what those 6 weeks were. That is what the desk was. That is what the tea and the bookmark and the wet hair on a Thursday were. I did not know I was building anything. Neither did she. But we were. 3 days after the honey, Tuesday, a little past noon, I was at the Monroe Structural Office on King Street, going over the shoring drawings with Riva, when the door opened and I smelled her before I saw her. Sabrina, yellow cocktail dress, like she had just walked out of a lunch at the Charleston Grill. Manila envelope tucked under one arm. The same perfume she had worn 15 years ago. Old Chanel, sharp on the top note, sweet underneath, the way she liked everything about herself. Isaiah. She smiled the way you smile at an old dog you gave up on. Flew down from Atlanta, settling an old thing. The old thing was the Ansonboro house we used to own together, the one on Society Street with the wisteria over the front gate, the one I had helped her father repaint the summer we got engaged. Her mother's trust still had my name in a secondary clause. She needed a quick claim, my signature, before the title could be moved over cleanly. It's just paperwork, Isaiah. We're grown-ups now. Nothing about the way she said it was casual. She had not driven 6 hours from Atlanta on a Tuesday for paperwork alone. Riva looked up from her desk behind me. She did not say a word. She held the look on Sabrina for about 3 seconds, longer than politeness required, and then she went back to her drawings. Riva has a way of listening without appearing to listen. I have learned to trust it. I asked where Sabrina was staying. She said, the Venue. 2 nights. That night, Delaney's old Volvo was parked out in front of my house, the way it was every Tuesday. Sabrina drove her rental car down Rutledge Avenue slower than she needed to. She saw the Volvo. She did not stop. At 3 in the morning, she sent me one word, cozy. I did not answer. At 10 the next morning, she knocked on my door. Delaney was still there. She had stayed the night before, just to talk. There was no more to it than that. She had slept on my sofa under an Afghan my mother had crocheted before I was born, and I had slept in my room with the door open, and we had talked until 3 in the morning about her mother, and about my father, and about the summer we all 3 of us spent in a house on Folly Beach in the year 2013, before anything got broken. Sabrina walked in without asking. She did not look at me. She walked straight to the writing desk in the dining room, straight through the doorway like a woman who had measured the distance ahead of time. She pulled the white sheet off the desk in one motion and dropped the manila envelope on the walnut top. The sheet lay on the floor between us like a body. She opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of yellowed paper, folded in fourths. Delaney's handwriting at 18. I recognized the loop on the D before I even understood what I was looking at. Sabrina read it out loud. The opening line was, Isaiah, I don't know how to say this, but I've loved you since the day you sat next to me in Dr. Grafton's class in the fall of freshman year, and I don't know how to stop. She read it slowly. She read it the way somebody reads a will to a family who wasn't expecting the ending. She had rehearsed the pauses. She had rehearsed the small breath before the last line. I could tell, because I had lived with her for 8 years and I knew every version of her performing voice. This one was the one she used to use on juries when she still thought she wanted to be a lawyer. She let the last word hang. Then she turned to Delaney. 15 years, honey. That's not friendship. That's a stakeout. She turned to me. She was never happy for us. She was watching. She hired you for the house because she wanted a badge to walk into your bedroom. Wake up, Isaiah. You're a load-bearing wall to her, and she's been measuring you for 15 years. The word load-bearing landed exactly the way she had meant it to. She had chosen it. She had chosen the whole speech. She had rehearsed it, probably, in the mirror at the venue that morning. I asked her where she got the letter. She smiled. Your mother-in-law showed it to me. Well, showed it to a drawer she forgot to lock. 5 years ago. I kept it, just in case. Delaney went white. She understood what I understood, that her mother had not handed the letter to Sabrina, that there had been no betrayal. Her mother had left the drawer unlocked on the day Sabrina had wandered upstairs uninvited, 5 years ago, and Sabrina had put the letter into her purse and carried it home. That was all. That was the whole, small, clean theft. Delaney stood up. She reached for her jacket on the back of the chair. I caught her with my eyes. Just held her there for 1 second. Then I turned to Sabrina, and I kept my voice low, the way my father had taught me to keep it when I was young and angry and about to say something I could not take back. Sabrina, get out of my house. She laughed, a dry, small laugh, the one she used to use at parties. Sign the papers by Friday, Isaiah, or my lawyer files. And Delaney, sweetheart, enjoy the reruns. The door closed behind her. The white sheet was still on the floor. Her perfume stayed in the room for another 20 minutes, hanging by the ceiling like something that could not admit it had lost. Delaney did not cry. She walked over and picked up the sheet, folded it into a neat white square, the way you would fold a napkin at a nice restaurant, and set it on the seat of a dining chair. Then she laid her hand flat on the walnut top of the writing desk, palm down, and she left it there for a long moment. It looked, to me, like she was apologizing to somebody who was not in the room. Then she said, I need tonight. Alone. She left. The door clicked shut behind her, more gently than it had shut behind Sabrina. I sat down at the desk with the letter open on the wood in front of me, and I read it 3 times in the light coming in from the kitchen. My grandfather's clock in the hallway ticked 1 full slow measure, and then another. I did not turn on any lamps. Sabrina had brought a knife with her. She had sharpened it 15 years ago in a room I never saw. She had waited 5 years for the moment when it would cut deepest, and she had swung it, finally, on a Wednesday morning. But she had forgotten something. The knife was made out of a truth, a real one, a truth I had needed to know for 15 years, and had never been given, because the wrong person had been holding it the whole time. I folded the letter carefully, the folds Delaney had made when she was 18, still crisp. I laid it flat on the desk. I did not put it in a drawer. I did not hide it. I let it stay right there in the middle of the walnut top, where anybody who walked into that dining room would see it and know it was there. Sabrina brought a weapon. She forgot she also handed us the truth. She came back the next afternoon. Late light, not yet dinner. She did not bring food. She did not bring anything. She sat down at the counter and folded her hands on the marble, the way you fold your hands when you are getting ready to say the thing you flew home to say. I did not turn on the lamps. The kitchen was that soft blue color it gets when the sun is still up, but the shadows have started leaning long across the floorboards. I stood on the other side of the counter, and I waited. Yes, she said. I wrote it. I was 18. I never sent it because I saw you kiss Sabrina on the porch of the Kappa Sig house 3 days after I wrote it. And I could not, at the age of 18, figure out how to hand a letter like that to a boy who was already kissing my best friend. She kept her voice level. She was not asking me for anything. She was just telling me what had been true for 15 years. I didn't go to Edinburgh for the fellowship, Isaiah. I applied for the fellowship after I bought the plane ticket. I went to Edinburgh because I could not figure out any other way to stand at your wedding and not break in half. For 12 years, I did not write you a letter. I did not call you. I did not send messages through anybody. I let the whole thing be over the way you are supposed to let a thing be over. She paused. I didn't wait for you, Isaiah. I let you go. There is a difference between those two things. I nodded. Not because I could speak. Because I needed her to know I was hearing her. Then she said the harder thing. When my mother passed, I came home for her, not for you. That part is true. But when I needed a structural engineer for her house, I had 3 names in my inbox. 2 big firms on Meeting Street. And Monroe. Structural. I typed your name into the address bar. That much I owe you honest. I chose you. I did not ambush you. I hired you. There is a difference between those two things, too. I sat down across from her. I told her something I had never said out loud to any human being in 13 years. That summer, the summer of 2012, I had felt her stepping back from me. I had told myself she was giving me room to make my own decision. And Sabrina, who had a way of noticing when a door was slightly ajar, had mentioned to me, twice, casually, that Delaney had somebody waiting for her in Boston. A graduate student. A man named Peter I never met and never verified, because I had no reason to believe Sabrina was inventing him. I asked Sabrina out to the beach at Sullivan's Island that night because I believed the story I had been told. And what happened at the beach that night had led, 11 months later, to a wedding. I chose the story I was told, I said. That is still my mistake, but it was not a stakeout on your side, and it was not free will on mine. She looked at me for a long time. She did not nod. She did not say that it was all right. She just looked at me, and I understood that between 2 adults who had lost each other to a story, the best you can offer is the same thing back. The truth about what you had believed at the time you had believed it. That is not a wedding gift, but it is not nothing either. I picked up the letter from where it was still lying open on the writing desk. I brought it back to the counter, and I set it down in front of her. This is yours. It was always yours. She did not open it. She slid it back across the counter, and then she carried it, herself, back into the dining room, and laid it down again on the walnut top of her mother's desk. Then let it stay here, she said, on my mother's desk, where she kept it safe. I asked her to stay the night, not to start anything, just so that this particular evening did not end in another silence, like all the other silences we had wasted between us. She nodded. We sat out on the back porch in bare feet and drank tea until the streetlight came on at the corner of Rutledge and Cannon. We did not kiss. We did not promise anything. I made up the sofa for her with clean sheets. She slept there. I slept in my room. I left my door open. I do not know exactly why. Maybe because closing it would have felt like an old choice, and I was tired of old choices. The next morning, I drove to the Vendu on Vendu Range. I walked through the lobby, past the concierge who didn't recognize me, into the little sitting room off the bar, where Sabrina was drinking coffee alone. I put the quitclaim on the table in front of her. I signed it in front of her without sitting down. I slid it back to her. That's it, she said. That was it a long time ago, Sabrina. I turned to leave. Behind me, she said. She'll leave again, Isaiah. She always does. I did not turn my head. I did not owe her the turn. I walked out into the light on East Bay Street, and I stood there for 1 minute with the smell of the harbor coming up off the water. Not every story needs a battle to end. Some of them just need a signature, a morning, and a writing desk set down in the right room. Slow. For 6 weeks after that, she kept sleeping at her own place until the end of the 4th week. We took walks on the Battery on Sunday afternoons, watched the shrimp boats come in past Rainbow Row, ate dinner at Husk once, at Pugin's porch once, at my kitchen counter every other night. Marcus and Riva finished the shoring on the Legare Street house. The final report was signed on a Friday. She read it in my kitchen with a yellow highlighter, marked 2 lines, nodded, and said, "Beautiful." I did not know if she meant the report or the fact that the house was going to keep standing for another 100 years. I did not ask. The first kiss happened at the kitchen sink with no build-up at all. She was washing a cup. I stepped up behind her to grab a dish towel from the hook above her head, and the space between us just closed. It was short, nothing more than 1 beat of contact. She turned in my arms afterward, and she laughed quietly into my shoulder. "Say it again," she said. I said, "Honey, this time, it was not a joke." That was the second time, and this time she smiled all the way back into my shirt, and she stayed there for a long moment while I stood there and did not move and let her. 8 months went by. Autumn came in the way it does in Charleston, humid until it is not. And then suddenly, one Tuesday, you need a light jacket for the walk from the car to the front porch. The Legare Street house was finished. Marcus and I carried the writing desk out of my dining room in slow, careful shuffles, wrapped in packing quilts, back to its bedroom on Legare Street, back to the exact patch of pine floor her mother had. Delaney stood in the doorway of that bedroom with her arms crossed, watching us set it down. Marcus stepped back and wiped his hands on his jeans and pretended to check a bubble level for no reason at all. Delaney said, "Thank you." I said, "It's the job." She said, "No, not that. That spot. Thank you for putting it back on that spot. My mother is going to sleep better tonight, and so am I, and so is that room." Sabrina tried one more time. An unsigned email went to two of my father's former partners, suggesting that I was difficult to work with after the divorce and hinting at other things she did not have the nerve to write plainly. Those two men had known me for 25 years. They had watched me grow up in the office at Monroe and Associates. Neither one of them wrote back to her. One of them forwarded the email to my father with a single line at the top. "Someone still has a lot of anger. Elias." Nothing came of it. Nothing was going to come of it. She stopped after that. Delaney started moving her things over slowly, without announcing it. Every 2 weeks, a box of books. Every month, a jacket in my hall closet. A pair of running shoes on the mat by the back door. The little brass owls she had bought in an antique store in Leith, which she set on top of my bookshelf on a Tuesday and never mentioned again. Her toothbrush appeared in a glass by the sink one weekend, and by the next weekend, the glass had 2 toothbrushes and a small tube of the toothpaste she preferred, the kind that tasted like anise. By January, my house looked more like her house than mine, and neither of us had ever had a conversation about that either. Some things do not need conversations. They just need doors that stay unlocked and cupboards that make room. 14 months went by. Late March. Seagrass at Sullivan's Island already turning green. One quiet evening, she pulled me by the wrist to the writing desk in her mother's house. We kept the house. We did not sell it. And she said the back of it sounded wrong when she had been dusting it that afternoon. I put my ear near the back panel and I tapped. Once, twice, 3 times. There was a hollow behind the side panel about 3 centimeters deep. I am an engineer. I know what a hollow means. We laid the desk gently on its side on a folded quilt. My hands were shaking a little, which surprised me, because my hands have not shaken on a piece of wood in 20 years. I pressed on a joint at the corner of the frame. A small hidden compartment slid open. Clean cut, careful joinery, done by hand. Not original to the desk. Somebody had added it. Her mother, I realized. Her mother had built this compartment into her own desk. Inside was a small brass key on a length of blue ribbon, and a card. Her mother's handwriting, dated the year 2022, 2 full years before she passed. "Delaney of mine, when you finally give this desk to the boy you were too shy to give it to, tell him your mother said, about time." The key, I found out later that night, on the phone with her Aunt Louise, was the key to Delaney's grandmother's old house on Sullivan's Island, a small cedar-shingled cottage her grandmother had left to the 2 of us, to Delaney and me. In a codicil written the year I got divorced, her grandmother had written the words when they choose each other into the paperwork, like a person who had lived long enough to know the difference between a wedding and a choice, which meant her mother had known, all those years at the end, calling me by the wrong name, laughing at her own confusion she had known. She had left the drawer unlocked 5 years ago because she had already picked her side. She had picked me, all the way back then. Delaney cried. I laughed. I do not know why I laughed. Maybe because my knees stopped holding me up the ordinary way, and something else caught me. That night, we walked out onto the back porch. I did not kneel. I took her hand. "Someday," I said. "Not soon. Not slow. Just someday. On purpose." She looked at me for a long time. She said, "Say it again." I laughed. "Marry me. Someday." She said, "Yes, someday." That night, after she had fallen asleep, I sat at the writing desk in her mother's bedroom, her mother's desk. I opened the drawer where I now kept my pens, and I wrote one line in the notebook. The foundation was never the house. The house was never the desk. The desk was always the letter. The writing desk lives in the front room of her mother's house now. That is where it belongs. But every morning, I drive over with a paper cup of black coffee, sit down in the chair across from it, and write a few lines in the notebook I keep in the drawer. My work is structure. I know what makes a house stand up. It is not thick walls. It is not a deep foundation. It is that every beam carries exactly its share of the load, and no more than that. Love, it turns out, works the same way. Some people come into your life loud, and they demand to be the wall that holds everything up. Some people stand quietly in a corner for 15 years and carry their share without ever mentioning it. It does not mean they weigh less. It means they hold better. Sabrina thought she was bringing a weapon. She did not know she was handing back the truth. A truth Delaney and I had needed a third person to throw down on the table before either of us was brave enough to pick it up. I called her honey to make her laugh. She heard something else. And only after that did I finally have the courage to hear it too. Some words of love take 15 years to arrive at the right door. And when they arrive, they do not need to be loud. They just need to be said again. Have you ever loved someone quietly for years without ever saying it out loud? If someone walked back into your life after 15 years of silence, would you have the courage to open the door? If this story touched you, leave the word "say it again" in the comments so I know you were listening. Hit like if you believe in the slow kind of love. Subscribe so you do not miss the next honest story. And if there is someone you have not called in 15 years, today is the day.